Good day, everyone. This is Michelle Duma from the Department of Education, Region for Calabarzon, Schools Division, Quezon Province, Philippines. I'm currently working as Education Program Specialist 2 and at the same time the Division Gender and Development Coordinator. My research presentation will be focusing on developing gender mainstreaming plan for gender-responsive public schools in the Department of Education, Division of Quezon Province. Content of my research presentation will be focusing on the introduction, research questions, methodology, results and discussion, conclusions, and recommendations. As we all know, gender equality among men and women is fundamental to achieve the global initiative in the provision of inclusive, equitable, and quality basic education and in the promotion of lifelong learning opportunities for all. As an explicit support to promote gender equality and equal learning opportunities for all, the Sustainable Development Goals highlight the United Nations' intention to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. In the promotion of gender equality, gender mainstreaming is considered as a global strategy to achieve gender equality. As defined, gender mainstreaming is the process of integrating gender perspectives in the development, implementation, and monitoring of projects, programs, policies, or planning where women and men equally contribute to and benefit from. At present, gender mainstreaming is seen as a timeless strategy to achieve gender equality and empower women. Prior to COVID-19 pandemic, full gender equality remains unreached despite improvements. Only 25 and 36% represent women in the national parliaments and local government respectively. Existing community guidelines on lockdown amidst COVID-19 situation have increased the risk for violence against women and girls by 30% in some countries. Women account for 70% of health and social workers, and they bear additional burdens during the pandemic. The aforesaid scenario poses a great challenge among school leaders to implement gender mainstreaming and ensure that every individual has an equitable access to lifelong learning. In the Philippines, the Department of Education issued DepEd Order No. 32, Series of 2017, highlighting the commitment of the department to integrate the principles of equality, gender equity, gender sensitivity, non-discrimination, and human rights in the provision and governance of quality basic education for all. In support to the commitment of the Department of Education to quality basic education for all, the Schools Division Quezon Province, being the largest division in Region 4A Calabarzon, issued Division Memorandum No. 150, Series of 2020 to strengthen the implementation of gender-responsive basic education and to support the practice of gender mainstreaming. It is at this argument that the researcher deemed the necessity of investing in the development of gender mainstreaming plan, which will serve as guide or framework among public schools in mainstreaming gender perspectives in their policies, enabling mechanisms, programs, projects, and activities, and people. And these serve as the research questions of this study. Generally, this study aimed to develop gender mainstreaming plan for gender-responsive public schools in the division of Quezon Province. For the first question, this study sought to answer what is the extent of gender mainstreaming practices among public schools in the DepEd-Division Quezon Province in terms of the following entry points. We have policies, programs, projects and activities, people, enabling mechanism. Number 2, what are the hindering factors for implementing gender mainstreaming among public schools in the DepEd-Division of Quezon Province? Number 3, what gender mainstreaming plan can be proposed to increase the gender responsiveness of public schools in the DepEd-Division of Quezon Province? This research paradigm serves as the reference and guide of the researcher in the conduct of this study. The heart of this research is the gender mainstreaming practices of the public schools in the DepEd-Division Quezon Province, highlighting the 4 critical entry points, namely policies, people, programs, projects, and activities, and enabling mechanisms. Hindering factors towards the implementation of gender mainstreaming are also considered in this study, wherein expected output in the conduct of this research is the development of gender mainstreaming plan. For research methodology, descriptive design of research was employed. From a total population of 960, 282 school heads were sampled using Slobin's formula. School heads were purposively and randomly selected using purposive and random sampling techniques. Survey questionnaires were also considered as instrument in the collection of the data for this research. Weighted arithmetic mean serves as the statistical tool in the collection and analysis of this data. Data were also interpreted using the 4-point scale as follows. For the extent of gender mainstreaming practices among public schools in the DepEd-Division Quezon Province, we have the following scale: highly practiced, moderately practiced, less practiced, not practiced. As to the hindering factors for implementing gender mainstreaming among public schools in the DepEd-Division Quezon Province, we have the following: verbal interpretation, strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. For the results in discussion, Table 1 presents the extent of gender mainstreaming practices among public schools in the DepEd-Division Quezon Province in terms of policies. As indicated in Table number 1, development of policies that support the establishment of capacity building of GOD focal point system is highly practiced. This is followed by the setting up of GOD focal point system or GOD office. On the other hand, we can also see from the table that conduct of organizational-wide audit is not practiced, as well as the issuance of localized policies that support GOD mandates. Overall results indicate that gender mainstreaming practices in terms of policies is less practiced. Table number 2 shows the extent of gender mainstreaming practices among public schools in the DepEd-Division Quezon Province in terms of program, projects, and activities. As we can see from the table, observance of international, national, and local GOD-related events is highly practiced. This is followed by the conduct of basic GOD orientation or gender sensitivity training for the school's internal and external clients, which is also described as highly practiced. On the other hand, conduct of consultations with the Philippine Commission on Women and relevant organizations or individuals on gender mainstreaming, as well as review and revision of existing IEC materials to ensure the use of gender-fair language and images, are not practiced. Overall results showed that the extent of gender mainstreaming practices in terms of program, projects, and activities is less practiced. On the other hand, Table 3 shows the extent of gender mainstreaming practices among public schools in the DepEd-Division Quezon Province in terms of people. Table indicates that conduct of awareness campaign on GOD-related policies and mandates among school heads and GOD focal point system members is highly practiced. On the other hand, designation of people in strategic positions to be members of the GOD focal point system is also highly practiced, giving an overall result of highly practiced in terms of people. On the other hand, Table 4 shows the extent of gender mainstreaming practices in terms of enabling mechanisms. The table indicates that creation, reconstitution of God focal point system in accordance with MCW and pertinent policies issued by concerned oversight agencies is highly practiced, while initiation of exploratory activities within PCW or other agencies, institutions, and individuals to facilitate mainstreaming is less practiced, giving an overall result of moderately practiced in terms of enabling mechanisms. Overall results show that gender mainstreaming practices is moderately practiced. As to hindering factors for implementing gender mainstreaming among public schools in the DepEd-Division, Quezon Province, the table implies that absence of gender analysis to determine appropriately existing gender issues to address are considered or is considered as hindering factor. Another hindering factor considered by the respondents is the absence of gender mainstreaming plan to guide the school in the implementation of PPAs to support mainstreaming. Overall results show 2.84, which means that the respondents agreed on the posed challenges in terms of implementing gender mainstreaming. For the conclusions, number 1, gender perspectives are less mainstreamed into the policies and PPAs of public schools in the DepEd-Division, Quezon Province. People are fully utilized as key stakeholders in the implementation of gender mainstreaming. Enabling mechanisms are fairly used to support the integration of gender perspectives in the institutional practices of public schools. There are also posed challenges in the implementation of gender mainstreaming among public schools due to lack of gender analysis, gender mainstreaming plan, mechanisms to identify potential partners for resource mobilization, monitoring and evaluation system, and inadequate provision of gender trainings. Gender mainstreaming plan is also developed to serve as guide in further improving the gender mainstreaming practices among public schools in the DepEd-Division, Quezon Province, focusing on integrating gender perspectives into their policies, PPAs, and enabling mechanisms, and utilizing key stakeholders to sustain their gender effort. As to recommendations, public schools should be capacitated on the conduct of organization-wide gender audit, issuance of localized policies to support guide mandates, and development of localized policies to institutionalize the collection and maintenance of sex disaggregated database. Public schools should also consider the possible conduct of consultations with PCW and other relevant organizations or individuals, as well as with internal and external clients to support their gender mainstreaming. Third, public schools should initiate exploratory activities with PCW or other agencies, institutions, individuals to facilitate gender mainstreaming. Public schools should also sustain their best practices on implementing their gender mainstreaming to develop and structure their staff members, God Focal Point System members, and heads. The Division God Focal Point System of the DepEd-Division, Quezon Province should facilitate the conduct of competency development among school heads and members of the Division God Focal Point System to further capacitate them in the practice of gender mainstreaming. The gender mainstreaming plan proposed in this study for a gender-responsive public school should be considered for utilization in the Division, Quezon Province to serve as reference in their gender mainstreaming practices. For the future researchers, they may examine the acceptability and feasibility of the proposed gender mainstreaming plan to improve the level of gender mainstreaming practices of public schools in the DepEd-Division, Quezon Province. For my references, thank you very much for listening.